Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. Climate experts say we won't be able to live on Earth for too much longer because of global warming. Here's an article which appeared a few days ago. Too hot to handle? Experts weigh in on if Phoenix could become uninhabitable due to climate change. And the article has a graph showing how there's more hot days in Phoenix now than there was in the 1970s. This shouldn't surprise anyone because Phoenix has grown by a tremendous amount since the 1970s and is a notorious urban heat island. This is a National Weather Service study from 15 years ago. They concluded that summer nighttime temperatures in Phoenix had warmed 7 to 13 degrees Fahrenheit relative to the surrounding desert. There's no question that summer nights in Phoenix have gotten much hotter than they were 50 years ago. But that hasn't stopped Maricopa County, where Phoenix is located, from becoming the fastest growing county in the United States. This is a 1984 Google Earth image of the Salt River Valley where Phoenix is located. In 1984, this was Phoenix, Tempe, and Mesa, and was surrounded by a lot of farmland. But now almost all of that farmland is gone, and Phoenix is the fifth largest city in the United States. This is 1984, lots of farmland surrounding the metropolitan area, and now almost all of that farmland is gone. There's no indication that climate change is keeping people away. In fact, the climate is the reason why so many people are moving there. The temperature record in Phoenix is severely contaminated by urban growth. It would be nice to be able to look at long-term temperature records from outside the metro area, but unfortunately they're very few and far between. The only really good long-term temperature record with current data in southern Arizona is located at Parker. Parker is at lower elevation than Phoenix and generally has hotter temperatures. Temperatures at Parker have increased over the last 20 years, but they're not as hot as they were around the beginning of the 20th century. And the percent of very hot days at Parker has increased over the last 20 years, but isn't quite as high as it was 120 years ago. In 1896, 17% of days at Parker, Arizona were above 110 degrees Fahrenheit. My first college roommate at Arizona State University was from Parker, and he thought that by comparison, temperatures in Phoenix were quite cool. That was in 1974, which was also the year of Phoenix's all-time record heat wave. During June of 1974, Phoenix had 18 consecutive days over 110 degrees, a record which has never been matched again. In 1974 not only had record heat in Phoenix, but it was also the peak year of the Ice Age scare. Time magazine, June 24, 1974. Another ice age? Telltale signs are everywhere. The Guardian, January 29, 1974. Space satellites show new ice age coming fast. So the record heat of 1974 was associated with global cooling, not global warming. Arizona's record of consecutive days above 120 degrees Fahrenheit occurred at Parker during the summer of 1896. 1896 had some very hot weather around the world. January of 1896 was the hottest month on record in southeast Australia. And a heat wave in New York City during the summer of 1896 killed nearly 1,500 people. Carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere were very low in 1896, so it should be pretty clear that heat waves are not caused by carbon dioxide. Going back to Arizona now, Parker matched the record of 7 consecutive days over 120 degrees Fahrenheit again in 1905. But that record hasn't been matched again in the last 115 years. The official all-time temperature record for Arizona occurred at Lake Havasu City on June 29, 1994. That record was 128 degrees Fahrenheit, but I don't consider it to be credible. None of the other stations in that region were anywhere close to 128 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures at Parker are normally very similar to those at Lake Havasu City, and Parker was only 117 degrees. It doesn't seem believable that Lake Havasu City could have been 11 degrees warmer than Parker. It seems more believable that the real Arizona temperature record occurred during June of 1896, when Parker reached 127 degrees. The main reason why Phoenix is getting hotter is because the city is growing. Journalists who try to blame it on global warming are either clueless, dishonest, or both. And it's not just Phoenix, which climate experts have been warning about. In 1989, experts told us that by the year 2000, Earth itself would be largely uninhabitable. Obviously that didn't happen, so later they changed the date to 2020, but I'm pretty sure that the Earth is still here. One of their favorite targets is the Maldives, which they said in 1988 would be underwater in 30 years. The animation on the right is Google Earth imagery showing how the Maldives have changed since 1988. You can see that there's been essentially no change at all to the islands. In fact, the Maldives looks like a very nice place to live. But reality never deters climate alarmists. The Maldives were supposed to be gone in 2018. That obviously didn't happen, so in 2018, climate alarmists simply pushed the date out by several decades. The new study says most low-lying islands are likely to become uninhabitable by the middle of the century. That forecast actually isn't quite as bad as the one from 1988 when they predicted that all of the islands would be gone in 30 years. These people repeat the same climate lies over and over again, decade after decade, generation after generation. But things weren't always this good in the Maldives. In 1837, islands actually were disappearing under the sea. February 17, 1837, account of the Maldives. Some islands have disappeared entirely. There was a lot of disease in the Maldives, which made the islands inhospitable to strangers. And the stable climate of the Maldives was described as being notoriously unhealthy. The article reported that temperatures in the Maldives hardly varied at all and said, the unhealthiness of the climate has been long notorious and has doubtless been the great obstacle to foreign intercourse and internal improvement. Apparently life in the Maldives is a lot better now than it was in 1837. In 2009, the president of the Maldives held a widely publicized underwater cabinet meeting. It appears that he wanted to scam guilty neurotic Westerners into sending him money. And here's an article from this year. Going under, is it too late to save the Maldives from climate change? Rising sea levels threaten the existence of the Maldives. But in the real world, billionaires are sinking huge amounts of money into development in the Maldives because they're not expecting it to go underwater. And you can pick up this nice little villa in the Maldives for only £12 million. There's no indication that the Maldives are going anywhere, and also no indication that climate alarmists ever tell the truth. According to experts, Phoenix is going to get too hot to live and the Maldives are going to drown. In 2004, the UK government's chief scientist, Sir David King, said that the entire world except for Antarctica was going to become too hot to live. So far, there haven't been a lot of climate refugees fleeing to the South Pole where it's 100 degrees below zero, but according to experts, it could happen any day now. October 13, 2008, climate change study predicts refugees fleeing into Antarctica. Their solution for preventing this catastrophe is to build lots of windmills. On February 12th of this year, USA Today bragged about how much of Texas electricity came from wind power. They said that wind power produced up to 2/3 of Texas energy output in 2020. And then, 2 days later, the wind turbines in Texas froze up in record cold and dozens of people died because they couldn't get enough energy. So a few days later, USA Today changed their story. They said, it's not just a cold front. Over a decade of misguided green energy policies are wreaking havoc in Texas and the lower Midwest right now, despite nonstop claims to the contrary. Bill Gates was one of the primary people jumping in making fake claims about wind turbines during this catastrophe. He claimed that wind turbines work fine in the cold in other places outside of Texas. But once again, that isn't true. I live near the edge of a giant wind farm in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I took this picture on February 14th just across the border in Colorado at the Rawhide coal-fired generating station. As you can see, there was no wind. The steam coming out of the smokestack was going straight up. And this huge array of solar panels was buried in snow. Temperatures were record cold, and in fact it was the coldest day ever that late in winter in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The only things keeping people alive in the record cold were natural gas heating people's homes and electricity coming from this coal-fired power plant. The survival of almost everybody in the upper Midwest, the Great Plains, and Texas was dependent on fossil fuels. They didn't have any other way to stay warm, any other way to keep the lights on, and any other way to get to the market to purchase food. This is how the Loveland, Colorado newspaper reported on this. The intense cold at Platte River Power Authority's wind farms in Wyoming forced operators to shut them down. When ice builds on the windmill blades, it creates an imbalance that can damage the turbines. As it turned out, the wind wasn't blowing there anyway, so wind farm shutdowns had little impact. Solar resources were also of little to no help because the solar panels were covered with snow. The cold and limited sunshine kept the snow from melting. The state of Colorado was completely dependent on fossil fuels for their survival. So did the state government learn anything by this? Apparently not. Without the fossil fuels, hundreds of thousands of people in Colorado might have died. Yet the state is still planning on going 100% non-carbon generation by the year 2030. Colorado state government is hoping that other states are going to be more responsible and will be able to bail Colorado out with fossil fuel generated electricity in case of an emergency. This anti-fossil fuel cult is basically a death cult, as Texas found out on Valentine's Day. The bottom line is that most of the places on Earth where humans live are not suitable for human habitation without an adequate supply of energy. Before the days of coal, people burned wood, which not only produces huge amounts of pollution, but also produces a lot of carbon dioxide. And wood is not an option for most people in the year 2021. Most of the country is naturally too cold for human survival, and the climate of Phoenix is much too hot. Without air conditioning, very few people would be living in southern Arizona. The climate of Phoenix has always been too hot to handle. It's not climate change that threatens Phoenix. What threatens Phoenix and most of the rest of the world is an irrational fear of carbon by government officials. They're making irrational decisions based on a fear of carbon, which is likely to lead to a genuine climate apocalypse. The apocalypse won't have anything to do with climate change outside of their homes. It's going to be that their homes are going to be too hot or too cold without fossil fuels available. Our leaders are completely insane, and they're taking us down the road to disaster.
But kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate. Okay?
Toto's been pulling back the curtain on this insanity for the past 13 years, and he's seen this coming all along. This was always the end game behind this massive disinformation campaign about climate. People have a choice to either get involved now and make sure this doesn't happen, or face the consequences in the near future. Toto and Kyrie are always reporting on this. You can visit them on the web at realclimatescience.com.